Welcome to today's video. I haven't published a video and I believe it might be 29 days if I had to guess. I haven't published a video in 29 days because the Eastern Pacific has all been relatively quiet until very recently. In the Eastern Pacific, we have an area of disturbed weather. The models have been showing, the GFS in European, but more so the GFS has been showing pretty consistently developing a tropical cyclone early next week early next week in Eastern Pacific for about 6 days now. I mean, the GFS has been much more aggressive than the European model, but GFS has been developing a tropical cyclone for about 6 days now. And GFS has been more aggressive with GFS actually forecasting for several runs a fairly robust hurricane into western Mexico, anywhere from Jalisco to Oaxaca. Since then, they've changed a little bit. Since then, the models have shifted a bit. The GFS has still been rather consistent on showing a relatively strong hurricane. And the relevant system the GFS is developing began to cross Central America on Wednesday and then fully emerged into the Pacific on Thursday. And has recently developed into a very broad surface where you can sort of see some deep convection down here. We'll see what becomes dominant, and I think that will be key in terms of traffic. You can see there's an area of deep convection around 94W, then some scattered showers further west by around 98W. Depending on how the system evolves, will help determine the track. You can see there's not really a well-defined center. You can sort of see. You can definitely at least see some subtle. You can definitely see some You can definitely see some subtleties on the south side of the circulation down in here, and then you can definitely see some subtleties. You can definitely see some northerlies down in here, and then you can definitely see some southeasterlies on the southeasterlies over around here. But we'll see. But so far there's definitely no evidence of any well-defined center of circulation yet. The microwave pass I'm not going to show, but the microwave pass kind of had that earlier today definitely confirmed that there's really nothing going at no close center yet. You can see there's some scattered showers, thunderstorms. And the system hasn't really made much progress today, and it's kind of worth noting because the global computer models do actually ramp this up relatively soon. You can see a GFS showing Genesis at around 10 degrees north, 96.5 degrees west in about 18 hours from now. While the European, when it starts to get, it's a little bit, this is happening a little bit slower, and a little bit more gradually, I should say, or more gradually. But has Genesis heading off further west, center consolidating further west at around 99W. I think it's because the European is initializing something more broad. I think the European is initializing more of a broader level at around 94W, while the National Hurricane Center Best Track database had a low pressure system at around 92W at the same time the 12's European's initialization. So if we start seeing the takeaways, if we start seeing a more of a broader system develop on more of a low consolidating to the west. Starting further west, it's likely to result in a little bit of a less favorable environment to off with, as the European forecast does seem to imply a system that likely at least have some problems organizing for the first few days, and then eventually deepens into early next week, and eventually recurves. As there's a trough. I'll just show it on here. There's a trough. There's a 500 millibar trough. There's a trough off the west coast in about 4 to 5 days. And the system rounds this ridge, which the Europeans gradually been trending towards a weaker ridge here. But still, the European still does show a stronger ridge than the GFS. And in the meantime, there's also this trough. This trough will kind of eventually, based on the tilt of this trough, based on the positive tilt of this trough, it's likely to turn back to the northeast, and initially enhance the output of the system, but eventually weaken the system as it starts to eventually induce some broader shear. There's also in the short term going to be a passing up a trough to the north that may induce some wind shear, moderate wind shear in the short term. We'll see what happens. The European seems to the GFS hasn't really been until the last run. The GFS hasn't really. The European has this year, but the GFS has been until the last run, showing relatively little shear. And the latest run, based on the zero ships output, GFS is now pivoting towards a higher shear scenario. As you can see, just based on, but nevertheless, the GFS still consolidates the system anyway. We have a Gulf of Tehuantepec gap event. It's likely to at least enhance the vorticity. You can see the 22 knots of shear based on the sounding. We see there's a Gulf of Tehuantepec and gap event that's likely to enhance the shear. Not enhance the shear, but I mean Gulf of Tehuantepec gap event where there's cold air diffusion coming down from the mountains. Mexican mountains kind of creates allows the vorticity and near the Gulf of Tehuantepec to become enhanced and kind of makes conditions more favorable for tropical cyclone strengthening. And the system continues westward. And then again, once that trough passes through, once the first trough passes through, you have the second trough. And before the second trough fully recurves the system, that's when the maximum environmental conditions are supposed to. You can see the GFS has the system starting to take off on Monday. Yeah, 4 knots of shear, so I didn't take a point average. You can see the GFS showing about 13 knots of shear, and that's with a really shitty point average sounding by about 3 days, and then eventually you can see it's best when the GFS is particularly aggressive with the system. And in fact, some runs have been bringing system. This 18Z run does not go as far, but some runs have gone down to about 940 millibars. I'll tell you why. You have this very divergent setup, and it's interacting with the jet streak that's unseasonably located to the south, and it's likely to result in an excellent pull with alpha channel as the system recurves. And that will likely at least help offset any potential increases in shear, and will kind of allow for the system to strengthen at first, and then once the shear starts to kick in, at least gradually lose strength as nears the Mexican coast. This is the GFS landfall. The current GFS landfall is in the Mexican state of Nayarit. I believe, yeah, the Mexican state of Nayarit, which is the same state where legendary Hurricane Kenneth from 2002 hit. Patricia hit Jalisco, while Hurricane Willow, which was the last other relatively similar hurricane back in 2018, hit Sinaloa. Take a look. The GFS has not always been consistent with this. You can see the 18Z run from a couple days ago, for example, had a system hitting Colima. So GFS has been slowly shifting a little bit more northward. I'm not really sure how much it's likely to verify. We've seen the computer models how much these new latest trends in the GFS, which to be fair, bring it in close to the rest of the guys. I'm not really sure how truthful that is, just because based on the historical model bias of systems in that area, you can sort of see. You can see out here. You can see. you can see the winds are out of the. You can see the winds are out of the south to southwest, and it's like you can see the winds are out of mostly the southwest at some of the upper steering levels, and that could. That's likely to allow for some northeasterly, definitely allow for northeasterly motion as the mountains region starts to encounter the trough, and perhaps at a more east with a more easterly component than what's perhaps being indicated by some of the on some of these model runs. It's worth noting that the GFS, despite the northward shift, the GFS still remains on the south side of the guidance with the European, even on some of the more European ones, it did have a little bit of a better initialization. It didn't really try to develop a system too far west, like the current, like even on yesterday's 0Z. On yesterday's 0Z run, that tries to bring the system into Sinaloa. That brings the system into Sinaloa. You still see the effects of like the stronger ridge modeled by the European taking into effect there. It's also worth noting that since this area is what has recently been designated Investigating 1E, and as a result, we have H-Worth runs now. The H-Worth and HMON, both models appear to be. Oops. Let me try and get in the facts there. Both the H-Worth and HMI. You can see the steering flow. You can see based on the H-Worth, they do generally show more of a northeastward, more of a true northeastward steering. That's likely to allow for the system to gain a little bit more, even a northeastward steering. It's likely to allow for the system to gain a little bit more latitude than what the GFS explicitly shows. I don't have full access to the European product, so I really can't comment specifically on precisely what the European shows. So based on the pattern, it does appear the European does appear to be a little bit slow, having an anticyclone, not really having as favorable of an up-level anticyclone in the early days of formation compared to GFS. As a result, formation takes a little bit slower. But even then, on some of the more functional European runs, they've at least shown at least modest intensification with pressure of about 980 millibars or so. When you consider the resolution of the models, would probably suggest at least a minimal hurricane, maybe even more. But anyway, you can see even at you can see the H-Worth and HMON tracks. They're a little bit further to the north because they're showing a little bit less of an, because the steering is more out of the steering is likely to favor more of a northeasterly track, as I mentioned earlier. But nevertheless, they both agree that the system will become a very strong hurricane. And you can see based on the simulated eye, you can see a very warm eye, which is surrounded by some reasonably cold cloud tops. And it also is worth noting that H-Worth has system consolidating pretty fast. With a major. You can look at the 18Z and you can look at the 6Z initialization. That looks sort of like that looks pretty good compared to what we have right now. Maybe convection might be a little bit weak, it's hard to tell with the color scheme. And then starts showing a massive burst of convection that eventually consolidates into a center, and I believe the center here is around 97, 90. I have a center consolidating around 98 west, which is in between the GFS and the European models. But probably a little bit more. But the overall track setup, however, does seem to, with the H-Worth and HMN, favor the European model. However, the European model hasn't exactly been super consistent either. We've only had one run of the H-Worth and HMON, and on top of that, it's also worth noting that the GFS has not been. It's also worth noting that possible knowing the GFS tends to do a little bit better in systems close to the Mexican coast, while the European tends to do a little bit better with systems close to Hawaii, and in general, especially with the non-GFS models, there's generally a westward bias when it comes to tracking, and the systems generally move more to the east than expected. We've seen this countless times. We saw this with Hurricane Olaf. We saw this with Hurricane Nora, with how it was forecasted to by the Europeans go up to Gulf of California, but instead crashed into Jalisco. So anyway, that's it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Regardless, we have a lot to keep an eye on, because the potential bit, it's very, very possible, strength-wise, setup is favorable enough that we can potentially be having a category 2 to 4 hurricane, maybe even stronger in the upcoming days. Like even the H-WRF and HMON models, like the HMON brings us into about 996 miles, or the H-WRF I believe brought to 940s. Anyway, I'll probably keep doing update videos on this daily as this potential situation unfolds.